Hello everyone and welcome to our frog dissection lab. With us we have Becca and Raylin, and they are going to be actually doing the dissection for us while I videotape. So prior to having started this lab, you should have done the amphibian dissection prep lab where you familiarize yourself with the different organs and prepare your dissection tray. Becca and Raylin each have prepared dissection trays here. So would y'all mind going over what exactly you have in front of you before you start cutting into the frog?
Yes, of course. So I know my setup, I've got this half the table. So I'm looking at my dissecting tray here so I can keep everything contained. We were talking about in the prep lab. I've got my razor, my scissors for cutting open skin, flesh, muscles out of the way, whatever it may be, my dissecting needle, and my tweezers for moving things around.
Perfect.
Over here you see kind of the same thing. I also have a dissecting tray. And then something new over here is going to be our pins, which look like this. And this is how we pin back skin flabs of the frog or whatever you're dissecting. And then we have a scalpel. Other than that, all my utensils look the same.
Perfect. And now your frogs look a little bit different to me. So Raylin, what's up with your frog? Why are the frogs so different?
So according to our hypothesis, we believe that this one is a male because it's smaller, and I will be dissecting the smaller one to see if it is in fact the male.
Okay. And therefore, if the small one's a male, the big one's a
Female.
So what is the organ that's going to be able to tell us very easily whether it's a male or female?
Right away we'll be able to tell if there are ovaries inside of our frog or not.
Okay. With all of our equipment laid out and safety equipment donned, so y'all should have visors or safety glasses, gloves to protect your hands, aprons to protect your clothes, and should hopefully have gotten a good night's sleep because we will be dealing with sharp objects. So safety first. I will let these two use some scissors to open the frogs. We'll drain the liquids from them and lay them out in the trays. We'll see y'all back here once the frogs are placed in their trays. All right, so Becca and Raylin just emptied their frogs and poured any juices in this main sink so that way we don't create any splash. The trash from the frogs went to the singular trash can in the classroom that is double bagged, ready for disposal or waste from this dissection. And then they placed their frogs in their dissection trays. Now, before you actually begin cutting, there are a few things that you want to identify before incision. Starting with Becca's theoretically female frog, we can look for the nictating membrane above the eye, or covering the eye. See that there is a flap of skin. Becca's pulling it forward. That is what's actually covering the eye in this amphibian. And then a primordial ear, ability to sense vibrations in the air. The tympanum. Notice how that even bounces, kind of like a drum. Fairly pronounced on Becca's big frog. How about on yours, Raylin? Can we identify the nictating membrane as well?
Right here.
All right. Just like in Becca's frog, it is pulled forward. And how about the tympanums?
There's two, like on Becca's, and they're right here. They're much smaller.
Much smaller, corresponding to the smaller frog. Very cool. Next up, what we have to do, and this will take a little bit of elbow grease, is you have to open the mouth of the frog. I would advise doing this with a pair of scissors, but very carefully. The jaw will resist, but you can crack the joints connecting it, and you'll have to in order to get a look at where the tongue connects. So we'll let these two get to it, and we'll see you when the jaws are open. All right, so here we are with Raylin's smaller frog where we were able to crack the jaw successfully. And you will notice that I was able to get the tweezers wedged behind the tongue and that the tongue is attached in the front, illustrating that point that the tongue is adapted to the way in which a frog eats. It lashes its tongue out and will then deliver the food that attaches to the tongue directly down the throat. So whereas your tongue connects at the back of your throat, a frog's tongue that needs to leave its mouth will connect at the front. Crazy. All right, let's get these guys laid back down and get ready for our incisions. All right, so here we are with this aerial view. I'm looking over Becca's larger frog. At the same time, adjacent, Raylyn is going to be performing the cuts on her frog. But I'll keep the camera from switching too much. Y'all can go ahead and get started with your first cut at the bottom of the abdomen above the hind legs. This is a horizontal cut that's meant to open the bottom of this cavity. It does twist a little bit to keep track of where the bottom of the abdomen is. You do want to make sure that you keep together the end of the digestive system of the frog. Becca is using a razor blade, fresh, that's very sharp for this purpose, since there will be skin and muscle tissue to get through. The individual doing the cutting may note a slimy texture to the frog's skin that would be different than the dry texture that you will feel on your own skin. And this is because the frog actually breathes through its skin. Blood vessels are concentrated against the skin to help the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Once the horizontal cut on the bottom is made, we can go ahead and cut vertically across the chest of the frog. Now, as you're making this cut, Raylyn, what do you notice about the skin and the muscle underneath? Those don't look super connected, did they?
No, not at all. They fell right apart and they weren't even really connected to begin with, and they're very easily pulled apart.
Yep, so all of the connective tissue that when the frog was alive would have connected the skin to the muscle has disintegrated in the fixation process, in the storage process. But you'll notice that these organisms have not nearly as much connective structures as a mammal would. But you still see the muscular definition of the frog's six-pack underneath, even though the muscle is fairly thin. Now with that first flap, Raylyn, what do we see inside there?
Yellow gunk, and then like this, I believe, is the lungs.
All right, we'll take a look at that closer when the final cut is made. Looks like you've got the chest cut done, so go ahead and make the final cut on the top, and let's go ahead and pin it down. Sorry for changing orientation on y'all, that is my mistake. Becca's got the cut down where she separated the muscle here again from the skin, and is now working to open the muscle and the cavity beneath. A little bit bigger of a frog has a little bit more tissue to cut through, huh?
Yes, Paul.
Now Raylyn's made all of the cuts on the smaller frog. You can see the insides there. And Raylyn, if you want to go ahead now and pin down those skin flaps so that way we can do a compare and contrast when we're done cutting the big frog. All right, so first look in here. It looks like we again have a lot of the orange tissue. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then, again, a large and open cavity. Notably, neither of these frogs are female. So our hypothesis about size correlating to gender here was incorrect, which is a bummer. We'll have to see if we can get a female frog the week of the dissection, and I'll add that to the video later. We'll go ahead and finish our cuts and then pin down our flaps and get ready to discuss the organs that we see. See y'all in a few minutes after we're done pinning things down. So here we are back with the dissection. Now, working with these larger frogs, we learned something about the cutting process. So would y'all like to describe to me what you learned in working with a larger frog and its rib cage?
The larger frogs have much more defined and hardened bones. They're much larger and much more difficult to cut through.
So we had to do a lot of work to get through the rib cages. So you'll notice that on these cuts above the forearms, that we use the scissors to get through the rib cage. Now, Raylyn, would you mind touching the rib cage and describing its texture for me?
My initial thought is, whoa, because it feels really weird. I was not expecting it to feel that way. The texture of it is very hard and brittle, and honestly, I'm not sure how to describe it other than like the way it would feel like a bumps. If you had like little bumps and you were rubbing your finger on that, that's kind of what it feels like.
Multiple bumps. Yeah, so that's good that it's got that strong structure to help protect the organs underneath. Now Becca's with the bigger frog, you can even hear the texture hitting that bone. Now, the ribs are there protecting the thoracic region, which contains your heart. And now we're going to take a look at what organs are visible after this first cut through. So laying on top of the frog, because we will be getting rid of organs one by one, going layer by layer through this frog, we can see the heart. Three-chambered heart, we'll feel that in a few minutes. We can see the liver. We can see the fat bodies. And if we lift up a lobe of the liver, we can see a slightly, occasionally greenish pouch that is the gallbladder. Thank you very much, Raylyn. Let's go on over to the large frog. We again can see the heart. Three-chambered. The liver. Multi-lobed. And the fat bodies. Kind of weird to think that a frog doesn't store its fat on top of its muscle. Becca, would you mind peeling back the muscle on that flap again?
Here.
See how there is no fat beneath the skin and the muscle? You and I have that hiding all of our six-packs. Everyone's got a six-pack. You just can't always see it. These animals store their fat throughout their body. The reason why we store our fat on the outside is because we want to keep our warmth in. We're warm-blooded. These critters are cold-blooded. And the last organ that we need to see is the gallbladder. Very pronounced greenish sac on Becca's frog, storing the bile that will be put into the digestive system to help absorb fats. Becca's also got kind of a weird deflated lung sticking out. We'll see the set of lungs a little bit deeper back in a few minutes, but we do see the one and not the other. The other one seems to be not stretched out, still back behind where it's supposed to be surrounding the heart. So now what I'm going to ask Raylan and Becca to do is remove the organs that we've seen, and just the organs that we've seen, particularly that of the liver, so that way we can observe these structures underneath. So we'll again see y'all in a few minutes once our livers are removed. All right, so now we've removed the liver and some of the fat bodies to help us see the organs underneath. So Raylin, how about you walk us through some of these different structures that you're seeing?
I'm going to start with this big structure right here because I'm sure that's an eye grabber. This is the stomach, this whole area right here. And then this tiny area connected to the stomach is going to be our pancreas.
Cool. Even though that's not one of the organs asked to identify on this lab, you may remember it from our lectures. The pancreas is the tissue that secretes hormones to deal with substances like sugars. After our stomach, what is the next step in our digestive tract, Raylin?
We have our small intestine right here.
Okay, and that continues along up until we get to?
The large intestine, which is located right here.
Yep, looks like it might be a little full, hopefully with just gases, not substance. But then at the very end, we do have that rectum that will connect to the cloaca. And what's a cloaca, Raylin? Let's see, well, we actually can't see it, but the cloaca is the structure where the reproductive, digestive, and urinary systems all meet. It's the shared exit of all three of those. So we've got all those organs associated with digestion, and then one organ that's hidden underneath the stomach. Look kind of like a brown bean. What's that, Raylin?
This is our spleen.
Crazy. Okay, so now that we've seen it in a smaller frog, let's take a look at this in a bigger frog.
All right, we have the same things over here. Again, our stomach, quite large. The pancreas over here, you can see it's this darker pink right here, the more thicker tissue, which leads our stomach then into our small intestine. Large intestines, you can see, are all up over in here.
Yep.
And then to the rectum and the urinary bladder, which is very deflated.
That's right.
And all of this connects back to our cloaca, which again, you can't really see. And that's the end of the digestive, excretory, and both the entrance and exit for reproductive.
Cool. And then where's your spleen, Becca?
My spleen is right here.
Again, that brown bean-shaped thing underneath the stomach. Now, we'll do something a little bit exciting. That stomach looks like it's full of something. Becca, would you mind cutting into it and revealing the contents of this frog's stomach live on camera?
Love to.
Would you describe the stomach as fairly firm?
It's very solid, which makes me think even more that there's something in here.
All right, let's see if it's all just strong stomach muscles or if we've got a recently eaten meal.
Oh, it might just be stomach muscles. As you can see in here, I'm not really seeing anything.
Just a lot of lining there. Okay, so we turned up no heads in our stomach. And now you will notice that the frog stomach is much more muscular than you would have anticipated. And this is largely because the frog stomach is where even some of that mechanical digestion is happening. Because looking back at the frog's mouth, you only saw a tongue. You did not see any teeth. without the ability to chew in its mouth, the stomach is a lot more muscular to help start that digestion process. There are lots of folds in there to help move things along and press on the food to break it down. Y'all don't need to know the names of the folds, but that is this frog's stomach. No dice on the recent meal. Raylyn, let's go ahead and try to do the same on your frog. Let's see if there happens to be maybe a cricket inside. Again, very firm, right?
Yes, very.
Lots of folds. But no dice on the insects. 0 for 2 here. Interesting. No insect parts, yeah?
I don't see anything.
But still are folds. All right. So, we have in the past found crickets in here. There does seem to be a little bit of somewhat digested chyme in there, but nothing to write home about in terms of whole insect parts. So next up, we will go ahead and remove the stomach to help dig a little bit deeper in the body of our frog. So that way, hopefully, we can identify the remaining organs. See y'all in a few minutes after we again remove our next layer of organs. All right, here we are with Becca's frog, quite large. She removed the stomach and all of the intestines. And in doing so, we did unfortunately find a little something in the rectum. So that is the solid waste about to leave the digestive system through the cloaca. Yuck, in a word. And we can return back to our organs. So covering the last few that we need to cover in this dissection. So you'll notice very pointedly that there are 2 dark organs near the back spine, and this is actually the most visible I've ever seen the vertebral column or the spine of the frog. Those 2 organs are our 2 kidneys. Now in us, they look much more like beans. In the frog, they're much flatter. So please do note those. And now up top, looking back at our heart, we can see a very defined feature of our lungs. This frog having a very deflated right lung. And the 3-chambered heart. So now here, I'm going to actually ask Becca, this is something that you have to do with a tactile sense. So you have to be able to touch it. Becca, I'll ask you to grab the heart and see if you can feel the number of chambers that are present.
I feel one big one at the bottom.
Okay, 1 giant ventricle.
And then there's 2 right up at the top.
So those 2 atria. So the blood mixes in the ventricle before being pushed back out to the body, and it will return into the 2 atria. Now, at the same time that Becca was doing that, Raylyn was doing the same thing with her frog. Having removed the liver, intestines, stomach, and digestive tract, we now have the heart, lungs, and some of the digestive tract still there. But notably, we found that there was a stringy substance at the back of the frog. That's something that was missing in Becca's frog. Raylyn, what do you think that is?
These are the oviducts in a frog, so we actually discovered that even though mine is a much smaller frog, it is in fact a female.
Yeah, so those are the structures which will fill with eggs when the frog is getting more close and ready to spawn. Send out its eggs before they get fertilized. So our small frog ended up being the female. What a surprise. Now back there again, we still see the kidneys underneath the digestive tract, that dark color there. Kind of cool. Now Raylyn, how about your lungs? One on that side. One on that side, both not inflated, both seeming fairly strong here. And then do the same thing with the heart.
Yep, it feels like we got one big one at the bottom, and then it feels like there's two separated up top.
Crazy. 3 chambered hearts of our cold-blooded amphibians. So that, I think, concludes. Oh, Becca took out one of the kidneys to look at in greater detail. Individual organ. So that will conclude our investigation of our different organs. We've gone through and labeled all of them. The tongue, the eye. We did not dissect into the brain because I do not want y'all breaking into the skull, but you do know where it is in the skull itself. The lungs, the liver, the large intestine, the stomach, the heart, the gallbladder, the cloaca, the kidneys, the thorax region with its rib cage, the small intestine, the bladder, the tympanum or pseudo ears, and then the abdomen, the soft region below the rib cage that stored most of our digestive system. So now we'll ask Becca and Raylyn to please clean up the frogs. Again, all wastes will go into the double bag trash can in the room. You can throw away your pins into that trash can as well, but the rest of the materials will be cleaned up first with soap and water in that back sink, and then we'll spray them down with ethanol to sanitize. So, hopefully y'all enjoyed learning about the frog during this lab. Thank you, Becca and Raylyn. What did y'all think of this?
I liked it. I like dissections.
It's pretty fun.
Cool. Please do go back and take a look at the last questions after the lab, and make sure that you've taken enough photos to document these organs for yourself. You will need to study these photos for our final exam.